So now we're going to talk a little bit of general college football, and I don't ever remember the coaching cycle getting this crazy this early. But welcome to 2025
No
because
kidding.
it's crazy.
Bob, I was telling Nick Pierce this earlier in the season, but I do think that the whole NIL evolution of college football, I think that is also accelerating some of these timelines. So whereas in years past, a coach may get an extra year or two, I think just with the whole NIL piece and being able to kind of go out and pick your players, I think that gives these coaches a little bit of a shorter leash. And I think you're seeing, boosters and others kind of ponying up that money for buyouts if they're not getting the results on the field that they want. I mean, we talked James Franklin, that's a huge name from Penn State, Brian Kelly, LSU, Billy Napier from Florida. You're right. It's been especially crazy. And the crazier thing is it's going to get worse in the next several weeks.
Yeah, and by the way, you do an excellent job carrying that podcast with Nick because Nick is such a monkey on your back. Correct me if I'm wrong. The double coverage, right?
That's it.
Okay, and you can find it on your podcast store. Listen to what a star Pat Kelly is, and what a just a louse that Nick Pierce is. Nah, we kid Nick because we care. Back to the college football coaching ranks. You probably know where this question's going. Somebody just got fired in Auburn lately. What's next?
Oof, man. If I'm going to throw a little bit of a jab here, probably a lot of golf.
Right,
I think a lot of people know that he's a pretty big golfer. He whenever he's in Lynchburg, will frequent Boonesboro Country Club, doing
right.
some golfing there. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes a little bit of time, a month, 2 months to kind of recharge to the extent that you can. But I've always said these coaches, especially when they make it to, these ranks of the Big Ten, the SEC, they're addicted to competition and they're addicted to getting back out there and coaching and kind of being under the bright lights. So I don't think he's done. I think he's going to try and find the next move. Um, I don't know if you're taking me this direction. I do not think, just several factors here kind of come into play. He will not be coming to Liberty. That is my opinion. I don't have any insider information, but I do not think Hugh Freeze is making a return to the Mountain.
I would agree based on. I mean, first off, and from everything I know about Jamie Chadwell, he's a really good guy. I'm not trying to throw Chadwell under the bus. I don't think you can get rid of what you have right now. And Jamie Chadwell, to me, has shown no evidence to say he needs to be James Franklin or Brian Kelly or one of those other guys. I see no evidence in that whatsoever. And honestly, I think it's silly that we have to have this discussion, that I even bring it up. But again, welcome to 2025. I think Jamie Chadwell's about as safe as anybody can be.
For several reasons, Bob. I think I think from a buyout perspective, I don't think Liberty boosters, and so on. I don't think folks are going to pony up that 20-something million dollars left on the remainder of his contract. I think you are not too far removed from that Fiesta Bowl season. And granted, the team from last year and this year has, in my opinion, underperformed to a degree. But I don't think they've underperformed to the extent that, hey, we've got to can our coach. That said, I would not be surprised if there are some changes to the coaching staff overall. But no, I definitely think that Coach Chadwell is safe.
And one more thing, you talk about the Fiesta Bowl season. I think a lot of people don't bring this up. Maybe it's me being dumb, but were those Jamie's players or were those Hughes players? Because that's the year after Freeze. Chadwell just I don't want to say takes advantage of what he had given to him, but it didn't mess it up. So I don't
No,
think you can kick him for that.
no, it's a valid question, and you can only kind of play with the hand that you're dealt.
Yep.
A lot of times people say, "Oh, you didn't play anybody," and that's like, well, it's the schedule that we were given. We beat
Right.
the teams that we were given. I would say the same thing for Coach Chadwell in that Fiesta Bowl year. You weren't able to handpick your guys, but you had to coach them up for the course of
Yep.
13, 14, 15 weeks. And they did that, and they got the best out of that team. So sure, maybe it was a 60, 70% Hugh Freeze team, but you still had to coach them and you still had to get the execution on the field, and they did.
How much do you pay attention to jobs that are open right now?
Oof. Me in general, or
Yes.
these coaches that
You, Pat Kelly.
well, selfishly, I'm born and raised an LSU fan, and
Okay.
we're going through it right now. You fire Brian Kelly, you get rid of your athletic director. So I'm going through a very challenging time watching my LSU Tigers, who play Alabama this weekend, which is not great. I like to kind of keep an eye on the job search. What bothers me a little bit, and I'm seeing this through a former player lens, is I don't like when some of these schools that have a coaching opening are trying to start some discussions or trying to start some of the poaching process of coaches that are actively coaching.
Right.
You saw it with Hugh Freeze when he left Liberty to go to Auburn. Um, you know, it just makes it tough on the players, feels a little bit unfair to the players. And don't get me wrong, these coaches work incredibly hard. And when they have an opportunity to take a big promotion, they deserve that. I really just don't like it when it's during the season because it doesn't benefit anybody.
If I'm Brian Kelly's agent, if he even thinks about going anywhere near a sideline right now, I am telling him no, 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 because what, the $54 million is a lot of money.
Yeah, and I think the language in his contract is if he takes another job, it's part of that is offset. And so the
Yes.
school that hires him will then be paying a portion of that. If I'm Brian Kelly's agent, which I'm not, obviously,
Mhm.
I'm saying, hey, we can go for this lump sum settlement. We get this from LSU and then go take that coaching
Right.
job because then to an extent you're kind of double dipping, but it's how they've written this contract up.
Because I think with Hugh, if I read it correctly, Hugh gets his 13 million. I think it's a 13 million buyout. He gets whatever. It doesn't matter what he does. He can get another job tomorrow, and he still gets the full buyout. I think is what I read. Is that true? Have you read that?
That is my
Yeah.
understanding.
So I mean, now here's my real big problem slash question. Penn State was in the playoffs last year. You got rid of James Franklin, and you're going to get another coach. Who are you going to get that? I mean, let's say James Franklin lost the locker room. Have you ever been in a situation where a coach, quote unquote, lost the locker room?
No,
Okay,
I fortunately have had the privilege of
good.
working or being on some winning programs, and then guys that commanded respect and were terrific leaders.
I don't know that you lose the locker room, by the way, by losing to UCLA and Northwestern. I mean, it probably doesn't help, but I don't know that I would call that losing the locker room. Anyway, with that being said, James Franklin, the knock on him was he couldn't beat big teams and win big games. The coach that I keep hearing that comes up for Penn State is, I hate to go with what Pat Kelly hates, but people will always bring up Matt Rule. Do you know what Matt Rule's success rate is against top 25 teams?
I do not hit me with it.
It's not good. It's not. I mean, it's like, I don't know if it's and whatever, but it's really not good. And I don't understand in the long run. I think athletic departments are kind of short sighted because, hey, we're going to get rid of this guy and then we're going to go on a searching hunt. I mean, what happens if Penn State has to go down to their fourth or fifth choice?
It's not great. And one of the reasons that I kind of I push back on Penn State's decision that they made, or at least when they made it, is it kind of felt like a self-inflicted wound because they didn't have to make that firing right here, right now, in the
Right.
month of I guess it was early October that it
Yep.
happened.
Yep.
You could have made that decision 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, but now you're kind of in flux. So I don't love that. But I guess circling back to your point, um, I don't love the hey he hasn't won the big game or you've got to win the big game. I think what you're looking for in a head coach is really just it sounds cliche, but the leader of men, a culture builder, because you know you build a strong culture, you're bringing in good guys. Eventually, that is going to turn around. So if it is a Matt Rule, what does he look like in terms of building his culture or kind of putting his thumbprint on an organization? So I'm a bigger bring in a culture guy who can turn things around versus, well, he's 21-7 against the spread or he's 21-8 against top 25
Right.
teams. So I don't know. That's my soapbox.
I want to talk about Frank Rocco real quick. You're welcome to get on a soapbox whenever you want there, but college coaching wise, I want to bring up a couple things here real quick. Besides your soapbox, because you obviously have made that crystal clear. There's two jobs that don't hear about being mentioned that I'm surprised. And again, I'm not saying they deserve it, but again, we live in 2025. Steve Sarkisian at Texas, because they've underperformed in terms of what they think they should do,
Sure.
and Sharon Moore at Michigan. And goes into another question because, Michigan is so big on we need a Michigan man. At least that's what they personify with the media. Do we need to get away from people who have, like, I don't want to say ties, but you don't want to. Do you want a Liberty guy coaching Liberty? You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
It does. And selfishly, I'd love a Liberty guy coaching at
Mm,
Liberty because the number one candidate right now that would come to mind is a Mike Brown, but that's a whole nother story.
right,
No, I think I would take it back to you've got to find what fits your culture.
right.
And whether you want to say like, oh, you've got to have a Michigan man to coach Michigan. I mean, it's recency bias, but Jim Harbaugh kind of was that guy. But no, I mean, in my opinion, where people get themselves in trouble is the nostalgia of, oh, we've got to bring such and such coach home, and it's like, well, is he truly the best candidate or the best fit for our culture? Once again, kind of going back to my LSU tirade here. From the very beginning, Brian Kelly, everyone was like, "This does not feel like a good cultural fit. He does not fit LSU." And lo and behold, things kind of just didn't work out. So yeah, I'm a huge culture guy.
Well, and at the end of the day, too, like, I'll bring up Shane Beamer because if Virginia Tech, for some reason, decided to hire Shane Beamer, 9 times out of 10, when you hire somebody, you're going to have to fire them, too. That's not going to be fun. And I don't say you have to look at it that way, but I think to bring the nostalgia part of it, I kind of think you do need to look at it that way of if this ends in a divorce or ends in a separation of ways here, how bad is that going to be, for the program as a whole? Now, I'm sure people don't look at that because I'm just going to throw Tech again back out there. I don't know that Whit Babcock feels like he's going to be there in 15 years. I don't know. Maybe he is. But do I want to be the person that is having to have that talk with Shane Beamer? And Beamer holds a lot of name in Blacksburg. Do I want to be that guy that's going to have that discussion? That's the way I look at it, too.
No, and I think that's a good point, kind of seeing it through that lens. But sort of on that same note, you don't see your like your Frank Beamers anymore, and some of these coaches that are sticking around at a school for 10, 12, 15 years. Your Joe Paternos,
Yep.
and I think that's kind of just that's an element of the times that we're in now. Again, whether it's NIL, uh, getting a little bit I say trigger happy to get rid of a coach who hasn't performed for a year or 2 years. So I don't think you're going to see coaches at schools anymore for more than that 7, 8, 9 year period.
If you knew what you knew now and you're Virginia, I mean, so many people criticize George Welsh, but George Welsh was knocking out 6-4 every year. And to me, you can call it a security blanket, but I mean, you're over 500 every year. 7-3s can be thrown in, obviously. Even 8-2s, 9-1s. I would take that every day of the week. Every day of the week.
Ooh, I don't know. I feel like for some of these schools, it's like once you make it to the mountaintop and you've
Right.
experienced, that 10-0, that national championship, or along those lines, you've been to the playoffs multiple times. I see where that leash gets a little bit shorter, and it's tough when you've got fans clamoring and you've got folks that are paying good money and things like that. So I certainly see it both ways. I don't know.
I would
That's tough.
take it every day of the week, but 2025 won't take it every day of the week. That's the
No,
difference. And Bob
yeah.
Alvis does not. Bob Alvis is a resident of 2025, but it's almost like he doesn't live in 2025 with his thinking, per se. So,
I like that.
by the way, before we talk about Frank Rocco real quick, I listened to the Double Coverage podcast back in week 1, and I believe you said it was more of a disaster for Arch Manning week 1 than it was Bill Belichick.
It was, yes, the way that the season started out, but I think things have really started to shift over the course of the last 8, 9 weeks.
I don't know that anybody that hired Bill Belichick at North Carolina could have dreamed it would have been this bad.
It's so tough because when you look at a track record and it's you've had X number of Super Bowls and he's in the playoffs, he can attract recruits and say, hey, I've been at the NFL level, I know what it takes. But I don't know, Bob. Maybe we go back to kind of what I was just saying a couple minutes ago about culture.
Yep.
Was Bill
Yep.
Belichick the right cultural move for University of North Carolina? And having hindsight being 2020, I think the answer is probably no.
And with all due respect, it's not Bobby Petrino at like a Louisville or an Arkansas where he is now. I mean, Bobby Petrino can't just whip out the NFL resume to somebody and say, "Hey, look at all these Super Bowls I had." Nobody can do
Right.
that aside from Bill. But anyway,